This is the discussion we had started in the last class, but for some reasons we couldn't go ahead. So now today I'll be talking about heap management, because we've completed our discussion on stack management and stack allocation. Now we'll continue our discussion on heap management. Must have told you already that stack allocation is all about allocating space for local variables, because they do not have any did not have any existence or did not have any importance once the once the function is over or the method is over. So therefore stack allocation makes sense when we use it for allocation of local variables. But when it comes to variables or objects which can be used across procedures, across functions, in such case stack allocation is not going to be a very useful technique. So therefore we have one more technique which is called as the heap allocation. So heap allocation is the one which is going to be useful. So therefore the heap allocation is going to be done in case where you want to have memory which lives indefinitely, or the program explicitly deletes it. So it is up to the program to have to use the heap. Whenever you want to use it, is going to use the memory that is being allocated by heap management. So certain programming languages that we use, like C++ and Java, have an operator called as new operator. And what this new operator is going to do is it's going to create objects, and these objects do not limit themselves to procedures. They can be passed from one procedure to another. So such objects, as I've discussed already, the stack allocation is not appropriate. So therefore such objects are going to be allocated space using the heap, and heap management is the one which is going to take care of such allocation of space. So now currently our discussion is going to be about the memory manager of heap, which allocates and deallocates space within the heap. So what it is going to do is it's going to serve as an interface between the application program and the operating system, because it has to take the permission of the operating system to allocate space. So therefore it's going to be an interface between the application program which we are running and the operating system. So we'll just see the outlines that we are going to go through in the discussion. So these are the different topics that we will be discussing today. So first we'll be talking about the memory manager. Then we'll talk about the memory hierarchy of the computer. Then our discussion will be in as far as locality in programs is concerned, to what extent memory programs use memory, and because of the principle of locality, how optimization can be done using the memory hierarchy. That is one discussion we are going to have. Then we'll be talking about fragmentation. Fragmentation is something in which we do have some space that can be allocated, but for various reasons we will not be able to allocate this space. That is what fragmentation is all about. We'll be talking about reducing fragmentation. How do we reduce this fragmentation? There are two techniques that we'll be talking about: best fit and next fit in object placement. And then we'll talk about how the coalescing of free space, how we combine the free space and manage it, is what is the second topic that we're going to talk about, and reducing fragmentation. And finally, our discussion is going to be about manual deallocation requests. Okay, what are the problems that we have with manual deallocation, and what are the conventional programming tools that are there that are to support the deallocation techniques. So this is what is the agenda for the day, and these are the discussions that we are going to have in heap management. So we'll start with the memory manager. The memory manager is the one which is responsible for allocation and deallocation of space. Now what do we call as allocation and what do we call as deallocation? So when a program is going to request for memory for a variable, an object, or anything like that, then what the memory manager is going to do is it's going to produce chunk of contiguous memory. So it's going to produce a chunk of contiguous heap memory depending on the requested size, and then that is going to be allocated for the specified variable or object. Now, once this specified variable or object is utilized and it is of no use, any further, then then what is going to happen is deallocation of space is going to happen, because it has used and now it is not going to be of any use. That memory, that amount of memory, it goes back to the pool of free space that we have. It goes back because some other program or some other procedures can use it. So therefore, it goes back to the pool of free space, and this is what is called as deallocation of memory. So the memory manager actually does these two activities: allocation and deallocation of memory. So now we'll move on to we'll move on to understanding how complex the activity of memory management is. Actually, if the memory was used, if the memory allocation requests were used in chunks of same size, then it wouldn't have been a problem. And whatever memory that is used first is the one which is going to be deallocated first, just like first come first serve. So you allocate a procedure some memory, and that is the first one that is going to be released. If these two conditions are followed, what are they? They are like, no, memory is used in chunks of same size, and the release of the storage is going to be like depending on a fixed pattern, maybe first come first serve or some other pattern. In such case, memory management would be very simple. In such case, memory management is very simple. But unfortunately, they don't. None of the procedures follow that mechanism. Very few languages might try to follow one of them, but none of them follow them, and most of them don't follow both of them. So therefore, memory management is going to be not very easy. It's going to be a typical task. So what is desired? What is desired from a memory manager? Just allocating space and deallocating space is not what we expect from a memory manager. So we expect some efficiency from memory manager. So what kind of efficiency do we expect from memory manager is number one is space efficiency. So we expect the memory manager should minimize the total heap space that is needed by a program. So it is going to minimize the amount of space that is utilized by a program. That is what is space efficiency. Then we talk about program efficiency. So a memory manager actually is going to it's going to make a good use of memory. When making a good use of memory, automatically it allows the program to run faster. Suppose the memory that is allocated is allocated a small portion of area, then the program can use that memory easily and faster, and in that way the efficiency of the program is going to increase. And the third one that we expect from the memory manager is low overhead, because the allocation and allocation are very frequent operations, and it is going to take a lot of time and efficiency. So therefore, we expect these operations to be very efficient to the extent possible. That is, so these are the three things that we expect from the memory manager: space efficiency, program efficiency, and low overhead while allocating and deallocating. These are the three things that we expect from the memory manager. So now we move on to the next one, which is the memory hierarchy of a computer. So we will try to understand what is memory hierarchy of a computer. So there are two things that we need to understand here, because the efficiency of a program is going to be depending on the time that is taken for execution, and also the amount of space that is going to be used for the execution. Okay, so what we can do, how can we increase the amount of the efficiency of the program is what we are trying to discuss. So how fast the memory can be accessed is the one which is very important discussion. But unfortunately, we have a situation where uh, we can have fast storage. We can definitely have fast storage, but these fast storages are very small in size. And we also can have large storage, but unfortunately these large storages are slow, are very slow. So therefore, we need to have a right combination of small and large storages, so that these operations can be performed faster. So for this reason, we need to have a hierarchy of the large and small storages, so that we make the best utilization of the memory that is available. That is what is called as the memory hierarchy. So we'll just have a look at how the memory hierarchy of a computer is going to be. So this is an example of the memory hierarchy in a computer. So if you observe here, the fastest is the one that we have here, which is called as register, and the amount of time that is taken by this to respond to any operation is 1 nanosecond. But unfortunately, this register cannot hold huge amount of data. It can only hold up to 32 words of data. This is not specific. This is a simple example that we have taken, this memory hierarchy. Now then we move on to the next one, which is the first level of cache memory. This is the first level of cache memory. This is also a very fast memory, which takes around 5 to 10 nanoseconds, 5 to 10 nanoseconds of time to respond to any operation, and its space is 16 to 64 KB. That is the amount of space it can have. Then comes the second level of cache memory, which is going to be 40 to 60 nanoseconds. It could have response time of 40 to 60 seconds, and it can hold up to 128 KB to 4 MB. Next comes the physical memory, which we call as RAM. So this is what is RAM. It is going to have a response time of 100 to 150 nanoseconds, but space is at most can be 2 GB, 4 GB, 8 GB, and lot. Now we have something which is called as the virtual memory or disk. Why do we call this virtual memory? And because this has nothing to do with the computer actually. This is only a storage space. We call this as secondary storage. So as far as the processor is concerned, it doesn't know what is this memory. So therefore, it is secondary storage, and it has a it has a response time of 3 to 15 milliseconds, and its space can be huge in terabytes. Also, you can use in terabytes. So now this is the way in which the memory hierarchy of a computer is going to be. So if we have the right balance of data, because we all understand that the entire data that is required by a program is not utilized at a given point of time. So therefore, we have the right balance of data right from the top to bottom. So whatever is needed, very importantly, we put at the right place. For example, register or the cache memory, and whatever is not very important at a given point of time, we keep it at the RAM, or in the secondary storage. So that in that way, there is every possibility of making the best utilization of the memory. So that is what is about the memory hierarchy of a computer, and how best we can utilize the memory hierarchy of a computer. Now coming to the next one, which is locality in programs. As I'm just talking about it while discussing about memory hierarchy, the entire data, is not going to be used, and most importantly, there's going to be a variation when a program runs, in which part of the program is going to be running at most of the time. So therefore, we'll be talking about it. Most programs actually what they do is they exhibit a high degree of locality. So they try to have access to data at a particular place. That is what we call as locality. So there are two types of locality. Number one is temporal locality, and number two is spatial locality. So what is temporal localities? So memory locations that are accessed by a program, just now or a few seconds before are likely to be accessed again in a short period of time, then we call it as temporal locality. So whatever is accessed is going to be again accessed. For example, you have a variable I in your loop. You put it in a particular location. So each time there is every chance that that variable is accessed in a loop. So that is what is can be called as temporal locality. Next is spatial locality. If memory locations close to the locations that are accessed are likely also to be accessed, then we call it as spatial locality. Not only the one which is already accessed, the one which are close to it also are likely to be accessed, then we call it as spatial locality. So these are the two local degrees of locality that are available in the programs. So what happens generally is, if you see, observe here in the experience of programming, generally programs spend 90% of their time executing only 10% of the code. As I've just told you, if you have a program, we can never say that the entire program, each part of the program is going to be running for the same amount of time. There are going to be certain parts of the program which will be running for most of the time, and certain parts of the program which will be running for very short duration of time. What is the reason? The reasons are programs often contain many instructions that are never executed. For example, exceptional cases, runtime exceptional cases, most of the time they will never be executed. Certain parts of the header files or certain parts of import statements that we use, they might also be not executed at and they also might not be executed at any point of time. And only a small fraction of code that could be invoked is actually executed. So only small fraction of the code that is actually invoked, because we have so many conditions. For example, if we have an if-else condition, so if condition might be running 90% of the time, else condition might be running 10% of the time. There's going to be a variation. And most importantly, a program spends most of its time executing innermost loops. Loops are the ones where the program spend most of the time, because they go on iterating a number of times. And tight recursive cycles, we have the phenomenon of recursion, where the program calls itself. So these are the areas of programs which go on executing more number of times. So certain areas of the program do not execute. So that is what is the locality in programs. So when you have when you have a particular part of code, for example, a loop that is running for most of the time, all the variables and that are used within the loop will be the one which will be accessed most of the time. In case they are all at a very small amount of space, they are all very close together. In such case, the utilization of memory can be best. That is what is the intention behind trying to understand the locality in programs. Now, so because we already understand that there is locality, there's going to be locality in programs. What we will do is we'll try to make the best utilization of it. How we are trying to use the memory hierarchy. We are trying to use the memory hierarchy and see to it that, because the programs are not using the entire data that is required, only small portion is going to be utilized. So therefore, what will try to do is, that small portion is going to be available at the place which runs at the place like registers or cache memory, because they can have only small amount of data. So that amount of data which is utilized most will be at that place. So therefore, the policy of keeping the most recently used instructions, which we call as temporal locality, and the next instructions, the ones which are likely to use space very close to the ones which are used, which we call as spatial locality, they are going to be in cache memory, and that is what is going to be very useful. So this temporal and spatial locality of data access can be improved by what we can do is we can change the data layout or we can change the order of the computation. We'll discuss about how the order of the computation can be changed for better utilization of the resources while discussing about optimization, code optimization. So this is what we can do, optimization of the memory, optimization of memory using the memory hierarchy. So we have by now we have finished our discussion about the memory manager. We have discussed about the memory hierarchy, and we have discussed about locality in programs. And while discussing about locality in programs, we also had discussed about how optimization can be done using the memory hierarchy. Now we'll talk about reducing fragmentation. So we'll talk about how memory can be utilized, and in fact how best memory can be utilized is what is going to be our discussion here. So whatever free memory, whatever free chunks of memory that is available after the space is allocated is called as holes. They are called as holes. So now when there is a request for memory, what the memory manager is going to do is it is going to check for an appropriate or check for a large enough chunk of memory and that hole or large enough hole, and then it is going to fit that request into this hole. That is what is going to happen. And whenever there is deallocation that happens, and this hole that is there, this hole goes back to the pool of free space that is available. So this is what is going to happen. So now if we have these holes, at different locations of memory, then we have a problem. For example, we do have one, as we have already discussed at the very beginning, the memory is going to be allocated in contiguous locations for a given request. For a given request, the memory allocation is going to be done in contiguous locations. Now we have enough space, and that space is available at different locations in the form of small holes. Then we will not be able to allocate the memory. That is what is the problem. So therefore, what we are going to do is all the contiguous small holes are then coalesced into a single large hole. Okay, then it is going to make sense. It is going to be useful. And because if we don't do that, the memory gets fragmented into a large number of small holes. That is where we have a problem. So therefore, what we'll be trying to do is we'll be trying to reduce fragmentation. So while trying to reduce fragmentation, we have a few techniques that we use while trying to reduce the fragmentation. So for example, we need small amount of memory, and we allocate a huge amount of space. It doesn't make any sense. So therefore, we have a few algorithms. We'll be discussing about two of them here. One is called as the best fit algorithm, and the other is called as the next fit algorithm. So these are the two algorithms we'll be discussing here. So now how fragmentation can be controlled. The first thing is we'll talk about, we have a algorithm called as best fit algorithm, and what it tends to do is it tends to spare the largest hole to satisfy subsequent large requests. It's trying to find out the largest holes to satisfy the subsequent larger requests. Okay, so therefore what it is going to do is it thinks that larger requests might come, therefore it is going to keep those larger requests for larger spaces, larger holes for later use, and whatever for example, there is this request for 5 KB of memory. It tries to fit it into 5 KB. If it is not possible, it might take 6 KB, but it will never allocate a 10 KB space for 5 KB request, because it expects there are going to be larger requests in the future, and therefore it saves them for future use. Next one is the first fit algorithm. First fit is the it has a huge amount of space, and whatever fits, for example, you have immediately you look at a 10 kb space for 5 kb request, it puts it there. That is what is called as first fit. Whatever that fits it, therefore it is what it found the first one that fits into the into which the request fits, therefore it is going to put there. So that type of technique is what is called as first fit. So these are the two different techniques that we have: first fit, best fit, and first fit. First fit may not be an efficient technique. Now, therefore, we'll talk about next fit in the future. In the next slide. So therefore, the implementation of best fit. Implementation of best fit is the one which we think is going to be very useful. So implementation of best fit can be done efficiently by separating the free space into bins. Bins means so the free space is going to be allocated into chunks of fixed size. So 5 kb bins. We're going to have, let's me say, 5 kb bins, 10 kb bins, 15 kb. So we're going to have spaces, fixed size spaces. That is going to make the algorithm of best fit being used very efficiently. So now, so this binning actually makes it very easy to find the best fit chunk, because we have, so anything around, for example, let us say minimum 5 kb is the one that is being allocated. Anything around 4 kb and all these, they'll be directly kept into the 5 kb bins. Anything more than 5 kb is used, you go to the next size, and that is the way it is going to be allocated. So if for small size requests from memory, there is a bin for chunks of that size. Very good. So therefore, those are going to be allocated to that size only. And then for sizes that do not fit, for example, in the first case, we talk about variables. Whenever integer variable, we all know that integer variable is going to be allocated this amount of size, and all the data types, we know they are going to occupy this amount of size. So therefore, that amount of size can be allocated for them. Now, for sizes that do not have a private bin, so in case you are talking about declaring an array with we don't know how much size you will be declared. So in that case, so we are trying to allocate the bins with the desired sizes. After the desired size is there, then we can use either of them, best fit or first fit. And then in case we do not have any appropriate bin, there might be cases where we do not estimate, we may not be able to estimate the amount of space that will be requested. In such case, we have a chunk which is called as wilderness chunk, and that can provide enormous amount of space, and that is the one which is going to be used. So in this way, each time we may not be wasting our time in thinking about which fits, because for anything with small size of memory, we can directly go to the first size bits, small size bits. Anything that has a bigger size, they can go to the next size bits. The only problem is going to be in case where we have a huge amount of space requirement. In that case, we'll go for this chunk, and then from there the allocation is going to be done. So this is what is about the way in which binning can be used to see to it that best fit algorithm is going to run at a better, is going to be a better option. Now, this best fit may not be the best strategy in all the cases, especially in the case of spatial locality. The principle of by locality, spatial locality. Why? Why? The reason is, when we use best strategy, the amount of space that fits best may be at a different location. But by the principle of locality, the principle of spatial locality says that the memory that is very close to it, is likely to be accessed. A number of times. In such case, best fit may not be a very good technique. Therefore, we use a strategy called as next fit. In case the chunk of exact request cannot be found, in such case we use the next fit. So next fit is the one that has last been used, which is very close to it. And if enough space is available, then we are going to allocate that space. In fact, that may not be the best one, but in that way, it improves the speed of allocation. Speed of allocation is going to be improved, so that way efficiency is going to increase. So this is how best fit and next fit can be used in combination to make best utilization of the space and efficiency. Next comes the how do we manage the free space? How do we combine this free space? How is coalition of free space going to be done? So to allocate the chunks in memory, what we can use is we can use a bitmap. Why do we use this bitmap? Is bitmap is used to understand the fact whether which chunk is being used, which chunk is being not used. So therefore, this bitmap is going to have one bit for each chunk in the bin. So each chunk is going to have one bit being allocated. So a one if that bit is going to be 1, what does it indicate? It indicates that the chunk is occupied. If the bit is going to be 0, it indicates that bit is 0. That bit is free. That chunk is free. So in that way, we can have a bitmap which is going to tell us which chunk is utilized now and which chunk is not being utilized. So in some cases, when chunks are not utilized, it makes it possible to combine the free chunks with the adjacent chunks, and therefore the heap can form a larger chunk. So in that way, by having this bitmap, we can understand which is utilized at a given point of time and which is not utilized. Therefore, chunks of space, chunks can be combined together to make a larger chunk. So that is the way in which you can coalesce, you can combine some free space. So how do we manage this? There are two data structures that are used to support this coalescing of adjacent tree blocks. One is called as boundary tags, and other is called as a doubly linked embedded free list. So what is this boundary tag is? This boundary is the boundary of a chunk. At both the low and high ends of each chunk, whether free or allocated, we keep some vital information. Like what? Like what? What information? Whether it is free or used. If it is free, there is going to be a 0 at both the ends of a chunk. If it is utilized, then there is going to be a 1 at both the ends. Because as I've told you just now, the bitmap, 0 means it is free, 1 means it is being used. Next, a doubly linked embedded free list is going to be used. We all understand what is a linked list. So the free chunks are also linked in a doubly linked list manner. So whatever are free, they can be linked in a doubly linked list manner, so that that amount of space can be allocated whenever there is a request for that amount of space from the program. So now we look at an example. We look at an example of how this coalition is going to be done. So if you see here, we have chunk A, chunk B, and chunk C. 3 chunks of space is available here. So if you look at the first bit in chunk A, it is 0, and the last bit in chunk A is also 0, and the amount is 200. Let me say 200 bytes. So this amount of chunk is free now, is not utilized. So if you see here, chunk B also, both the ends it is 0, and it is 100 bytes, let me say, and this is also free now. If you look at chunk C, it is utilized. It is utilized. So now what we can do is, because chunk C is utilized, chunk A and chunk B, both of them can be combined. Now we understand that these both are free. These both can be combined into a large chunk, and with doubly linked list. These are the linked list. So this linked list will be, now these two will be removed. These two will be removed, and it makes one big chunk. Let me say chunk D. This becomes chunk D. So this 300 bytes of chunk is going to be made, and this is going to be larger, and this is is going to be useful for further reference, future use. So that is the way in which correlation of free space is going to be done. So that is about the combining small pieces of chunk into bigger pieces. So now we get into the last one, the deallocation requests. How efficiently can deallocation requests be done? Some programming languages, they have manual deallocation requests. I think you all know, you all must have used free space, how to free space in programming languages like C and C++. In this case, the programmer must explicitly specify the deallocation of memory. So any storage that is no longer accessed must be deleted, and any storage that might be referenced must not be deleted. This is the most important one. Okay, so this is very difficult. We don't know which must be deleted, which needs to be deleted, and which might be used. Some space may not be used for a long time, but still later can be used. Some space which is used recently may not be used forever. So therefore, the amount of space that is required and that is not required is very difficult to decide. So that is what is the issue. So what are the problems with manual deallocation? What are the problems we're going to have with manual deallocation? So there are two types of problems that we have with manual deallocation. So failing to delete data that cannot be referenced is called memory leakage. So this data is not referenced anyway, and we do not delete it. The programmer doesn't delete it. So therefore, this type of error is called as memory leak error. So this memory is not of no use. We don't delete it. And referencing to deleted data. So because we think that this memory, that a given memory may not be used, and we delete it, and later we start referring to it. That is one more problem, and we call it as dangling pointer dereference error. We all know what are dangling pointers, right? So two types of problems we have here. We do not refer to the memory and we do not delete it. It is called as memory leak. And second problem is we think we might not use the memory, we delete it, and later we try to reference to it, then it is called as dangling pointer dereference error. So therefore, it's very hard for programmers to tell if a program will never refer to some storage in the future. So therefore, these are the issues that we have with manual deallocation. Now, what are the programming conventions and the tools that can be used in this case? Okay, a few conventions and tools that can help programmers is number one, object ownership. It's going to be a very useful when objects lifetime can be statically reasoned about. So we can talk about the ownership. So who is going to be the owner and who has access to it and who can allocate, who can delete it. So that is what is going to be object ownership. Next comes one very important feature, reference count. If there are going to be any parts of the program that are referencing it, we increase the count. Okay, so this is very useful, and when the object lifetime needs to be determined dynamically. So as the reference count is still there, we do not delete the object. As the reference count becomes 0, then that object can be deleted. Number 3, region-based allocation. So this is going to be useful for collections of objects whose lifetimes are tied to some specific phases in a computation. So these objects, their lifetimes are very specific to certain phases. So therefore, these allocations are done based on the regions, and in such cases, so these are the 3 different cases in which these conventions, programming conventions, and tools can be utilized. And with this, we come to the end of this presentation, and then I stop sharing of it, and then I stop the recording.